at 5.
Remembering 9/11 20 years later. One of the few people in the air after both planes hit the World Trade Center was Melinda Murphy, helicopter reporter for our sister station in New York, WPIX. She walks us through that day and tells us about one of the striking images she remembers from before the attack.
Major problems this morning all over the place. It's not a nice day. Take your time on the roads. I think it's one of those bad karma days, but it's a beautiful weather day. I'm loving this.
My name is Melinda Murphy, and on September 11th, I was a helicopter reporter for the WB11 Morning News in New York.
It is beautiful out here today, I've got to tell you.
With me in the helicopter that day was our photographer, Chet Wilson, who was a former firefighter, our pilot, Ray Rivera, who was Army trained, and a woman named Brenda Bannon, who was training to be an aerial photographer. And then rounding out our crew was Daniela Carolla, who was at the station in the newsroom that day. That morning, we flew our normal morning show, but the one thing that was a little different is that we talked about the towers that day because they were bathed in this incredible crimson light from the sunrise that morning. So we even took video of it, and they used that video going into commercial break a few times because they were the prettiest we ever saw them ever in all the years that we flew. Chet and I went back to the studio, which was on 42nd and 2nd, and the helicopter went to New Jersey to park. And then when we were in the post-show meeting, we were sitting in the newsroom, and there's television monitors all over the newsroom, and we saw the video of the building on fire, and it was coming from the Empire State Building looking down at the tower. And on the way, I called my husband, who worked about a block south from the towers, and I said, listen, I think it's going to be a long day. And he said, I felt it. It was a big plane. This was not a small plane. We said goodbye, and then just as we reached the heliport, the second plane went in. That's when we knew, and everybody else knew, that we were under attack. So as we took off over the Hudson River, there was a huge fireball coming out of the building, and it was, I mean, it's hard to describe even now, 20 years later, what it was like to see that giant fireball. And so we flew all morning long, and they had us identifying aircraft and you know, trying to help them figure out other things that were going on from our vantage point. And then at one point, Chet had been a firefighter, and he said, those towers are going to fall. And I remember I was so mad at him. I'm like, they're not going to fall. See, 20 years later. And then they did. When the towers fell, we were hovering around the Lincoln Tunnel over the Hudson River. And so they were kind of right outside our window. And the first one was behind the second tower, so we couldn't quite see it come down, but we saw it. We saw the dust cloud coming up, and from where we sat, it looked like all of Lower Manhattan was gone. And I mean, I really thought that we had just seen 10,000 people die.
The whole second tower collapsed. The whole building is gone. The whole building.
I think we understood as a team the seriousness of what we were doing. We were the only aerial team up, and I think it was really I don't know, just an awesome responsibility that we had to provide the best coverage we could. So I made a conscious decision never to put myself on camera. The story wasn't about me that day, it was about what we were showing the world.
And it is a day that changed our country and the world. The fight against terrorism continues, and some state and federal law enforcement say this is not the time to let our guard down. All day Thursday, see our special reports 9/11 20 years later on News 2 in every newscast. And as a way to honor victims of September 11th, Delta Airlines and the American Red Cross are hosting a blood drive tomorrow at BNA. You're invited to go to the airport at the north end of baggage claim to make a donation. Walk-ins are welcome, but appointments are encouraged. Visit redcrossblood.org for